Hey, I'm Deanna. Welcome to my studio. This is a beginner's guide to chalk paint and chalk paint wax. I'll be making over this old side table and explaining the steps as I go. So let's get started. The most basic chalk paint finish is two parts, paint and wax, and I'll be demonstrating both of these in this video. With chalk paint, there is no major prep work before you get started. You heard that right, no sanding, no priming. But you do want to make sure your piece is nice and clean before you get to painting. You can give it a wipe down with some warm soapy water, or if your piece is very dirty, you can use something a little stronger like TSP to remove any grease or grime. I've already gone ahead and washed this piece down with some TSP, so I'm ready to start painting. You're going to need a tin of chalk paint. I've got the color French linen, which is a medium gray tone. Chalk paint comes in a lot of colors, so you do have lots of options. Annie Sloan created this paint in 1990, and she called it chalk paint because it has a chalky matte finish when it's dry. It's different than chalkboard paint, and there's actually no chalk in the tin. You'll also need a paintbrush. I'll be painting with the Annie Sloan Oval Natural Bristle brush, but you can really use any brush that you like. Pour some paint out to get started. I like to do this rather than dipping my brush right into the can so I don't contaminate the paint. Dip your brush in the paint and just go for it. Nice big strokes back and forth. Brush strokes go in every direction. Try not to overthink it. This is intended to be a handcrafted process, so easy and forgiving that anyone can do it. If you notice any drips or runs, try to catch those while they're wet. You can always sand them out later, but it's easier to just scoop them up as you go along. I also have a couple of small areas that my oval brush didn't quite fit into, so I'm just going to go with a little brush and get into those tight spaces. Don't worry if you can still see some of the original color underneath. I'm going to be doing a second coat, which will make that much more solid. I find that in most chalk paint projects, I do end up doing 2 coats of paint. This just has to sit and dry now for about 30 minutes, and then I'll come back and do another layer. The first layer is now dry, and with chalk paint, as long as it's dry to the touch, you're ready to move on to the second coat. All I have to do is pour out a little bit more paint, and I'm ready to get started. My second coat is done, and I think it's looking great. It's really nice and solid compared to the first coat. For this video, I'm going to be leaving it as a solid coat. But if you are interested in learning how to distress or create a worn finish, stay tuned for my next video, which will be on that topic. If you haven't already subscribed to my channel, go ahead, click that subscribe button and the notification bell so you're alerted when I upload that video. Now the next step in this video is going to be applying the chalk paint wax, which is the sealer for the paint, but I do need to allow this to dry. Again, it'll be dry to the touch in about 30 minutes, but I want to give it a couple of hours so it gets really nice and hard on the surface before we go ahead and rub in that wax. I'm going to clean up my brushes and then I'll move on to waxing in a couple of hours. The second coat is completely dry and I'm ready to move on to waxing. It was dry to the touch in about 30 minutes, but I let it sit for a few hours so that it could dry all the way through. You'll see in a moment that when we apply the wax, there's a lot of rubbing on the surface. And so if you wax your piece before it's dry all the way through, there's a chance you'll wear through the paint. Now that's fine if you're going for a distressed or worn look, but in this case, I wanted to keep the paint more solid, so I gave it that little bit extra time to dry. In order to wax, you just need a couple of things. First off, you'll need your chalk paint wax. For this furniture piece, I'll be using clear. It looks white, but it goes on the surface clear. And you'll need something to apply your wax with. You can either use a wax brush, and they come in all different shapes and sizes. You don't necessarily have to use one, but it does make the job a little bit easier. Or you can apply with a lint-free cloth. You're gonna need some lint-free cloths as we go anyways, so have lots of those on hand. Old t-shirts, shop towels, soft cotton rags, anything that doesn't give off lint will do. Work a little wax into the bristles of your brush, and then paint the wax onto the surface, working one section at a time. Once you've got that section completely coated, set your brush down, take one of your lint-free cloths, and then wipe that area to remove the excess wax. Once you've wiped the excess wax, you can move on to the next section. If you don't have a brush specific for waxing, you can do a couple of different things. You could repurpose an old paintbrush, which is exactly what I'm doing here. And I find that any brush that's round or oval does work better than a flat brush that's just a little bit too soft and floppy. Or you can just apply your wax using a lint-free cloth, and I'll show you how that works. You'll have two cloths. One will be for your wax on, and one will be for your wax off. Get a little bit of wax on the wax on cloth. Use the cloth to rub the wax into the surface. Still working one section at a time. And once you've got the wax onto that entire section, take your second cloth, a clean, dry, lint-free cloth, and just wipe with that to remove the excess. I find the brush comes in handy in any areas where there are details or grooves, because you can use the bristles to press in, whereas the cloth is a little bit trickier to get that right in those creases. As you're working through your project, you'll notice your cloths start to get clogged up with wax. At this point, they're no longer effective wiping away the excess wax. They're just kind of smearing it on the surface. So every once in a while, you'll have to swap out for a clean, lint-free cloth. If you've been wondering what's the purpose of applying this wax, it's the sealer for chalk paint. Chalk paint is very porous and absorbent, and so we apply this wax top coat to create a water-resistant, scuff-resistant barrier that's going to help your furniture stand up over time. Plus, it leaves it as a nice velvety soft finish. Because it is the sealer for chalk paint, you do want to make sure that you get it everywhere. It's very subtle, but when you're up close, you can see the color of the paint shifts ever so slightly, becomes a little bit more vivid, and that helps you to see the areas that you have wax and the areas that need wax still. On a high-use surface like the tabletop, it's never a bad idea to do a second pass just to make sure that you haven't missed any areas. I can see a couple of spots that look a little lighter in color, which tells me that I did miss those areas. So I'm just going to give the entire top a quick once over, apply the wax just like you did at the beginning, and then take a soft rag and wipe away the excess. Use some hot water to clean the wax out of your wax brush. The hot water helps to melt the wax off the brush. You can also use some grease cutting soap, like your dish detergent, to help further remove the wax. I like to keep my wax brushes and paint brushes separate. That way I don't have to scrub so hard between each use. Once you remove the majority of the wax, squeeze it out, dry it off, and you're good to go until next time. The wax is dry to the touch right away, but it'll take a couple of weeks to cure and get to its hardest strength. To maintain your finish, you can just dust with a dry rag, wipe up any spills right away, and if over time something starts to look a little dull or gets marked up, you can easily spot re-wax to touch up the surface. And in a couple of months, when you get tired of the color, no problem, just paint over it with chalk paint, because yes, Annie Sloan chalk paint will easily stick over top of Annie Sloan chalk paint wax. Okay, so project complete. Again, this is the most basic chalk paint finish, chalk paint and chalk paint wax. If you are interested in learning next steps or a few more creative hands-on furniture painting techniques, remember to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and go ahead and click the notification bell as well, because that's how you'll be alerted every time I upload new video. If you have any questions about today's video, please leave those in the comment section below, and please share your tips and tricks for chalk painting furniture to help out those who are just getting started. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you back here next time.